It is 6:17 in the evening. A person sits in a parked car outside a perfectly acceptable house. The engine is off. A work badge lies in the cup holder. Groceries are in the back. Through one window, a lamp is already on. Nothing terrible has happened. The job is stable. The relationship is not in open crisis. The mortgage is being paid. Yet the hand holding the key cannot move. Going inside feels like stepping back into a role that still functions, but no longer explains why it should continue. What has failed if the life itself has not failed? Why can success begin to feel like evidence against the person who achieved it? And why might the most dramatic escape be the least interesting answer? Carl Jung wrote about the different demands of life's first and second halves. Decades later, a Zurich-trained Jungian analyst named James Hollis turned that broad distinction into a recognizable map. He called one version of the crossing the middle passage. Hollis was not Jung's direct student. He trained at the C.G. Jung Institute in Zurich from 1977 to 1982, long after Jung's death. Before that, he had taught humanities for more than 2 decades. He later became the first director of training of the Philadelphia Jung Institute, led Jungian organizations in Houston and Washington, served in the Interregional Society of Jungian Analysts, and became vice president emeritus of the Philemon Foundation. That institutional record matters because Hollis is sometimes packaged as a supplier of inspirational thoughts about finding purpose. His actual subject is less comforting. He asks what happens when the personality that made your life possible becomes the personality that prevents the next life from beginning. The phrase he uses is provisional personality. Provisional does not mean fraudulent. It does not mean your career, marriage, loyalties, or earlier ambitions were lies. A young person has to build an identity before possessing much evidence about who they are. Family expectations, cultural scripts, economic necessity, temperament, wounds, praise, fear, and opportunity all contribute. The resulting personality gets us into the world. It earns approval. It avoids danger. It learns competence. It chooses some doors and does not notice others. That adaptation is not a mistake. The problem begins when a necessary first arrangement claims permanent authority. Imagine the person in the car at 23. Perhaps achievement offered distance from a chaotic home. Reliability became both strength and shelter. The workplace rewarded it. A partner trusted it. Children depended on it. After years of reinforcement, the role no longer felt like a strategy. It felt like identity itself. Then the rewards stop answering the original need. The promotion arrives and produces relief for 3 days. The holiday is pleasant, but changes nothing. A free afternoon feels more threatening than a full calendar. The person asks, what new goal will restore momentum? Hollis changes the question. What if the old goal is not failing? What if it has completed the psychological work it was able to do? This is the first reversal. A midlife disturbance is often treated as a shortage. More excitement, more romance, more status, more freedom, more proof that youth remains available. Hollis reads it as a transfer of authority. The outer world can no longer tell the person what their life means with the confidence it once borrowed. If the overlooked people who made Jung practical interest you, keep beyond Jung close. Hollis's next move is to show why the people and roles we love cannot carry all the meaning we project onto them. Projection is one of the difficult mechanisms in this passage. In Jungian language, projection occurs when psychic material is experienced as if it belongs primarily to someone or something outside us. The future partner appears to contain the life we cannot yet imagine. The institution appears to possess the authority we have not developed. The child carries the unlived possibility of the parent. The next achievement promises the recognition an old wound still demands. Projection is not simply stupidity. It helps organize attachment, ambition, and hope. But no person or role can permanently carry all the meaning placed upon it. When projection withdraws, the object may appear to change overnight. A career that once glowed becomes procedural. A partner who seemed to hold the answer becomes painfully ordinary. A city loses its promise. The person may conclude that everything was false. Hollis offers a more uncomfortable possibility. The object has not necessarily become empty, it may be returning meanings that never belonged to it alone. That is why the middle passage can feel like bereavement without a funeral. The old arrangement remains visible. What dies is its claim to be sufficient. The person in the parked car is not merely tired of a house. The house has stopped representing arrival. The badge has stopped representing worth. The schedule has stopped representing necessity. Each object remains useful. None can tell the person who must use it. This is also where the story becomes dangerous. If a role no longer carries meaning, why not destroy it? Quit, leave, move. Begin again with different people, different clothes, different scenery. Sometimes an outer situation is genuinely unsafe or untenable, and practical change is necessary. Hollis's psychological map cannot decide those facts from a distance, but dramatic reinvention can preserve the very structure it claims to escape. The provisional personality was trained to seek an external answer. When the old answer expires, it may demand a newer and brighter external answer immediately. The object changes, the demand does not. A new relationship is required to supply lost vitality. A new career must certify authenticity. A new place must erase the person who arrives there. The midpoint twist is simple. Disruption is not automatically depth. The task is not to remain obedient to every inherited role, nor is it to treat dissatisfaction as an oracle. The task is to develop what Hollis repeatedly frames as personal authority. That phrase can sound like self-confidence. Here, it means bearing responsibility for the conversation between conscious choices and the parts of the psyche that those choices excluded. It asks for more than impulse, because impulse can belong to an old complex. It asks for more than social approval, because approval helped build the provisional identity. It asks for attention to recurring patterns, dreams, resistance, fear, and desire without granting any single message unlimited command. Suppose the person in the car begins by asking one concrete question. Which part of this evening feels chosen, and which part feels merely continued? The answer may not be spectacular. Cooking for the family may still feel chosen. The professional title may feel merely continued, or the work may remain deeply meaningful while the performance of permanent availability has become automatic. The house may be loved, while the image of being the person who needs nothing has expired. This is why a crisis map is more useful than a demolition order. It separates the life from the unconscious contract attached to the life. Jung's contribution remains visible here. In his essay on the stages of life, he argued that the psychological methods suited to the morning of life cannot simply be extended into its afternoon. The first half emphasizes adaptation, establishment, and outward achievement. The second asks for a different relation to the inner world, limitation, and mortality. Hollis inherits that turn, but gives it contemporary pressure. Many adults now pass through several careers, relationships, migrations, and identities. The crossing may not arrive at a particular birthday. It may appear when a child leaves home, when a parent dies, when a body changes, when work becomes unstable, or when the person finally gains enough safety to notice a question that survival once postponed. This makes the word midlife imprecise if treated as a calendar diagnosis. Hollis's map is about a structural passage, not a universal appointment at 45. Nor does it explain every loss of energy or meaning. Depression, sleep disruption, illness, hormonal change, grief, financial pressure, caregiving exhaustion, trauma, and unsafe relationships require their own forms of attention. Symbolic interpretation should not replace medical assessment, practical support, or evidence-based care. The map becomes valuable after those cautions, not before them. It allows a person to ask whether a role is wrong or whether the fantasy attached to the role has become impossible. It asks whether a relationship has failed or whether the partner is being asked to carry an unlived self. It asks whether the person wants freedom or wants freedom from the anxiety of choosing. At this point, Hollis undergoes his own status reversal. He may look like the popular Jungian who tells successful adults to find meaning, but his argument resists the lifestyle spectacle built around that phrase. He does not promise that a secret passion will turn into a perfect career. He does not make every dissatisfaction sacred. He asks the adult to withdraw impossible demands from the world and become answerable for what remains. That is a much less marketable promise. After minute 10, another correction changes the final part of the map. The provisional personality tempts us to imagine a pure, authentic self hidden underneath it, waiting to be uncovered like an original face beneath a mask. Remove the social roles, follow the strongest desire, and the real person will finally appear. Hollis's mature work is more demanding than that image. There is no final identity that ends the conversation. The unconscious is not a warehouse containing one predetermined lifestyle. Meaning emerges through an ongoing encounter with choices, consequences, limitation, mortality, and the otherness of people who do not exist to complete us. Personal authority is not absolute certainty about who you are. It is a greater willingness to take responsibility for the life your choices make. This also protects the middle passage from narcissism. If inner truth always cancels obligation, then every promise becomes provisional in the weakest sense. But if obligation always cancels inner life, the person becomes a function. Hollis holds the tension. A mature choice must acknowledge both the claim of the psyche and the reality of other lives touched by the choice. The person in the car may eventually leave the job. They may remain and renegotiate it. They may discover that work was never the central problem. The map cannot supply the decision. What it can reveal is the authority from which the decision is being made. Is this action an attempt to make another object carry total meaning? Is it revenge against an identity that once protected me? Is it obedience to an inherited script? Is it a considered response that accepts loss as well as possibility? The difference will not always feel clear. That uncertainty is not proof that the process has failed. It may be the first moment when no external role can decide in advance. If this quieter account of a life transition is useful, stay with me. Jung's later heirs keep revealing that psychological change is less glamorous and more demanding than reinvention. Return to the parked car. The person finally opens the door and carries the groceries inside. That action does not mean surrender. Entering the house is not a vote for keeping every part of the old arrangement. It simply refuses to turn one evening's paralysis into a command from the universe. On the table, the work badge lands beside a ring of keys. One key belongs to a storage unit filled with objects kept for a future that no longer feels real. The person removes it from the ring and sets it down. It is a small act, almost invisible. No career is destroyed, no family is abandoned. One automatic continuation becomes available for examination. Tomorrow there may be a conversation about hours. There may be an appointment with a doctor or therapist. There may be a notebook containing 2 columns, chosen and inherited. There may be grief for the person the old life was supposed to prove. The middle passage is not the moment that supplies a new identity. It is the period in which the old identity loses the right to answer every question. That leaves one precise question for the viewer. In the life you have built, which role still deserves your commitment? And which role survives mainly because you have never placed its key on the table?